Hi, so over the summer I built this thing. It's a deck and pergola and a little summer house, and I did it because, well, we're having a glorious summer. I wanted the kids round for a couple of Barbies, and that's exactly what we've done. Because now we're coming into the tail end of summer. We're starting August, and of course we're going to come into autumn, and dusk is going to draw in. At the moment it gets dark about 9 o'clock. In a couple of months it's going to get dark about 7 or 8, and those evenings are still going to be enjoyable but sort of lost. So I decided to put some festoon lights up, and they look awesome in the dusk, and it makes a really sort of cozy kind of space where I'd like to extend that time, and so I put lights up. Now, of course, when putting electricity into something like the back of your garden, you have a number of choices. I mean, I could have just run a wire to the house mains and put it through some IP rated gear and we'd be on a winner. But I decided to give it its own power supply with these things. Yes, I'm going to put up a bit of solar. Now, I bought 4 of these 120 watt panels. I think they're 670 by 960 by 35 mil deep, 120 watts monocrystalline panels. And all solar basically it's the same sort of stuff. It doesn't matter much whether it's a little garden light that you're putting in that charges itself, a set of solar panels like this, or even a bigger installation. They all follow the same principles. So I thought what might be interesting is a video where I put this solar in and we talk about that stuff as I'm installing the solar to be able to run my lights. And I thought about putting the Halot out here. The Halot by Pyocrete is of course a resin-based printer, and they do the best with resin to make sure that it's not stinky. But it still is, and it's one of those things that puts me off using it in the house. So I've got a work shed right there, and I thought I'd put the printer in there as well as some lights. So what kind of things do I have to think about? Of course, the first thing is where to stick it. Now, I've got that shed right there, which is where the Halot's going to go. And that shed actually more or less faces south, which for me is that direction. Now, I'm in more or less the same latitude as London, which means I need to angle those solar panels at the best at 35 degrees facing south. So as the sun transits, it gets the most sun. Now, it's between 30 and 40 around where I am, but I'm aiming for 35. So my plan is to stick them on that roof, angled at 35 degrees, facing straight out that way, which is south. Now, of course, that's quite a convenient position, and you can get it as near as that. Every time you move off of that, you're going to lose a little power, but the nearer you can get to that, the better it is. But it's more of a guide and not a straitjacket. So, first thing is stick them on the roof. The next thing, of course, is why on earth did I buy 4? I mean, 4 at 120 is roughly half a kilowatt. That's the generation power at the best. Incidentally, these are reported to be about 20% efficient, which is pretty cool. But it's supposed to be half a kilowatt. Now, I know it's not going to do that, so I've kind of taken 20% off, and we're looking at somewhere around about 400, 350 watts generation over an 8-hour period, something like that. But I've picked this number for a specific reason. And the reason is these lights I've got up here, well, they're a 12-watt draw. The Halot is a 60-watt draw, so I'm going to be able to light these lights. If this gave its full output and I put it all in the battery, I'd be able to light these lights 133 days non-stop, which is crackers when you think about it. But it does mean that I'll always be able to turn the lights on, even if I use the Halot. Well, it'll give me something like 32 hours of use, something like that. So, plenty in order to be able to use the lights and the Halot and a couple of little ancillaries. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, that doesn't sound right. I mean, you know, it's 60 watts and they're 480 watts in total. That's more like 8 hours, not like 32. But you're forgetting that I'm going to put it into batteries. And of course, the question is, how many batteries do you use? How much batteries? Well, at 480 watts or 8 hours of charge, I have a potential of something like 4 kilowatts or so. So I didn't use anything. They were outputting at their full output it would generate in an 8-hour period something in the region of 4 kilowatts. So that's the power I have, because of course it continues to generate even though I'm using it. And where is it in that slope? Well, that gets very confusing, and so you just think, how many hours on average of sunshine will you get? What's the output of your panels? And then what's a reasonable amount of battery storage that can store that output? It turns out about 4 kilowatts of battery is going to be plenty to take the output for those panels. So I've got, by rules of thumb, a rough size of a system that I want to be able to do the job I want at the bottom of my garden, to prevent me from having to run a wire. And of course it gives me experience in putting up a larger, more complicated solar system than a garden light, and then can lead to maybe a bigger system in the house, having gained that experience in what is relatively an inexpensive way. Because I paid £300 for all those solar panels, plus the solar charge controller. And here is the solar controller. Now, the solar controller is just a bunch of electronic components that go between the solar panels and the batteries. It's just like plugging your car battery into the wall, only it has a little bit more control, and it makes sure the voltage from these things is converted into the voltage your battery needs, is sent to the battery, and also makes sure that it doesn't overcharge the battery. But it's really simple. It's solar panel, controller, battery. And of course, a whole bunch of cables, but they usually come with the panels or the controller anyway. So with those 3 parts, we're actually more or less ready to install our system. So let's have a quick think about what we actually did. The first thing we did is what's called an energy audit. Have a think about how much you're going to actually need. So we've got 12 watts here, a couple of lights in there, say another 8 watts because they're 2 at 4 watts, and then 60 watts for the printer. We're looking around about 80 watts that I'm going to need. So bump it up for other incidentals and we'll call it 200 watts. Now, if I use 200 watts for an hour, that's 200 watt hours. So how long do I want to do this? Well, more or less a day, I guess. So I'm going to need it to run for about 24 hours. And it turns out that 2 kilowatts would be 10 hours. So 4 kilowatts is going to give me about 20 hours, which is more or less a day that I'm going to use it. So in a day, if I were using everything fully, these panels could charge my batteries, and my batteries could fulfill my energy needs for a day. Now, all of that is fine and a bit rough and ready for fairy lights at the bottom of the garden. Now, if you want to do something a bit more complex, then your energy audit needs to be a bit more complex. The kind of degree that you need to give it for latitude, so I'm allowing, quite a lot really, 4 hours difference for a whole day, but it's fine for me. But the degree of latitude you want to give it is something you must estimate. When you estimate that, that'll give you the size of the system you actually want. Once you've got the size of the system that you want, well, you can start buying your panels, you can start buying your batteries, and you can choose your solar controller to go in between them. Of course, the power from the battery needs an inverter to be able to make it usable in a house, which is a 4th component you need. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And of course, there are other choices that you need to make, but those are the basic choices to get you up and running that you need to make about these things. Now, some of the choices you're going to make once you've done that is what kind of panels do you use? I mean, these are monocrystalline, single-facing panels. They're probably the cheapest and easiest to get hold of. You can get bifacial panels. That's where they have solar panels on either side. Now, I'm going to stick these at a 35-degree angle, so bifacial is no use at all to me. But it has been discovered that if you just hang them straight up and down, over time, they're actually more efficient than lying them flat. And it's a simple reason. I just drove down my road and lots of people have got solar panels up there and more than half of them are just covered in bird poop. Who's going to get on the roof and wash a solar panel? Nobody. And so if you hang them flat, of course, they don't get covered in quite as much dirt. And so over time, they're more efficient than if you hang them straight up and down than if you lay them at that 35-degree angle. Or so the research tells us. Me, I'm going to stick with the 35-degree angle, but it's a choice that I've made, and it's a choice that I've made when deciding on the particular panel that I'm going to use. Because this thing, it's a whole bone of contention. The solar charge controller, there are a couple of major types. There's something called pulse width modulation and something called MPPT. Now, it's without a doubt that MPPT is far more efficient than PWM, pulse width modulation. It's more efficient to the tune, I think it's about 30% more efficient or something like that. Unfortunately, of course, they're also more expensive. They're something like 50 to 70% more expensive. And so it's a choice that you need to make. Do you spend more on it, getting a more efficient one, or do you spend less on it, getting a less efficient one and just buy an extra panel? It's that kind of choice. And there are always choices. And of course, you'll find a legion of people telling you that one way is better and the other way is better. At the end of the day, it's a choice you want to make, and it always comes to efficiency versus cost. There's another choice, and that's redundancy. I'm a huge fan of redundancy. I'm a fan of what's called the RAID network in computing. The RAID stands for Redundant Array of Inexpensive Disks. When they first started producing large capacity computer disks, they were really expensive. They could carry terabytes, and if they broke, you lost everything. So what people actually did was buy cheaper disks of something like 250 gigabytes and run 8 of them at the same time. It was actually cheaper to do it that way, and if something broke, it didn't take the whole system down. And I'm quite a fan of that, particularly when it comes to things like solar. But that's a choice that I'm making. If you want one big system that you don't have to look after, then great, go for that. If you want it broken up into smaller sections so you have redundancy, but it'll take you a little bit more setting up, then great, go for that. It's whichever suits you. Me, I'm a fan of redundancy, and so I'm going to use what's called a redundant system. A redundant system is going to be these panels grouped into charge controllers, but with a smaller charge controller per panel rather than one big charge controller that covers all of the panels. As it happens, this is beginning to be the way that solar panels are going. New solar panels these days carry with them what's called a microinverter. You'll see them on the back. It makes them cheaper and easier to link up, and if a panel goes, your whole system doesn't go. They're putting the microinverters in the loft, and so repair of it is much, much easier than having one big inverter sitting in your garage. So redundancy is also coming through in solar. I'm a fan of it. If you're not a fan of it, don't do it. Go for one big thing that will actually do everything. Work out your panel size, work out your battery size, and then buy the solar controller that suits the size of your system. Me, I'm going to break it down into redundant parts and get the solar controllers that will match those redundant parts. It also means that if I've got it wrong and I need a bigger system, then it's much easier for me to add on to my system, which is another reason microinverters are coming in, than trying to resize the system and get a new charge controller for it, which will be an absolute pain in the neck. So I'm going for a redundant system because I'm going for a redundant system. It appeals to me. It fits what I think. If it doesn't appeal to you, don't do it. If you want to choose between PWM and MPPT, have a look at the difference. If you prefer MPPT because of whatever reason, sure, go for it. If you prefer PWM for whatever reason, sure, go for it. What really matters is it's solar panel, controller, battery. Now, batteries are going to be another huge bone of contention about what kind of battery is best. Turns out what kind of battery is best is one that suits you. Now, I'm going to use lead acid, and that means that this controller can cope with lead acid, and that may seem like a throwback. But as it happens, I have 4 lead acid batteries sitting in the garage that are up to 4 kilowatt hours, and so my batteries aren't going to cost me extra because I've already got them. Probably if I didn't have them, I would go for lithium, but I'm going for lead because I've already got lead, and I don't really see the harm in that or the worry about that for the next couple of years. Later on, if I need to change it or I want to change it to lithium, well, I can do, as long as my controller can cope with it. Or given that I've got a redundant system, I could also change the controller quite easily as well. Now, I don't think I was 100% clear there. If I've got a system at 200 watts and I run it for an hour, and that's 200 watt hours. If I run it for 2 hours, it's 400 watt hours, 2 times 2. If I run it for 5 hours, that's a kilowatt. 10 hours, it's 2 kilowatts. 20 hours, that's 4 kilowatts. So that amount of power is what I need to store. Equally, if I have a storage of 4 kilowatts and I withdraw 200 watts an hour, it will last for 20 hours. So the way you work from watts to watt hours is watts times time. Now, you're going to be faced with decisions all of the time, and at the end of the day, actually, truth be told, your decision is going to be somewhere between what you want and what you can afford. Now, I've gone for these things. These things are, in fact, PWM, pulse width modulation. They're not MPPT, which is multi-power point tracking. The reason I've chosen that is because this particular one will handle lead acid and it will handle lithium, which is what I want. And it also actually would handle nickel iron, which I'm considering when it comes to building your own batteries. So it's got a wide range of batteries it can cope with, and it's relatively inexpensive, which is what I wanted it for. So that's my choice for those reasons. You have different reasons, and so make a different choice. But the important thing is to make a choice. Now, very often, beside that, what choice you make barely matters. Go left, go right. It only really matters that you make a choice and go that way. That's how you achieve things. By wandering between the two choices, actually you'll just make a mess. And are you making the best choice? Well, given the information you've got, probably. A lot of this stuff, of course, I don't know. I looked up what the angle was for placing solar panels in my location. If you're a bit worried about stuff, well, you can just look it up. When it came to the power draw of things, I looked it up on the internet and it gave me the power draw. So use the internet as a valuable resource of information. Make a choice that suits your budget and what you actually want to do with it. Accept any constraints on that choice, because you'll never get perfect, and then move ahead with your project. Okay, so that's enough of talking about it. Now let's actually build a cradle to hold those solar panels, and that will be in a separate video. I hope this one was of use to you. Thank you very much for watching, and please do remember to like and subscribe.